Alright, Record of Ragnarok, chapter 97. At long last, we are here. This will be pure insanity, so buckle up and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any content like this, and also drop a like so you stay on this side of the algorithm going forward. Chapter starts off right where we left off with Siegfried's cell, as we see Nostradamus standing in front of him with Goal inside the crate. Siegfried has a soft expression on his face as Goal is surprised, saying, "Lord Siegfried, if you are here, that means this is Helheim's." And Nostradamus cuts her off and says, "That's right, the prison of the gods, Tartarus, also known as the Abyss." Goal freaks out at this point. She's like, "Why am I in Tartarus? It can't be. I'll become food for these monsters. Someone help me." Nostradamus pulls a lollipop out and hands it to Goal, which seemingly calms her down in something of a gag scene momentarily before she comes to her senses and says, "No, wait a second, what am I doing? What even is the situation here, Nostradamus? Why is a human in Tartarus? Hell, why are you inside Lord Siegfried's cell to begin with?" Nostradamus says, "Ah, yes, as a matter of fact, I am Siegfried's attending physician. I'm his doctor. Mr. Odin asked me to do this a while ago, and for that reason, I have a pass for this place." So apologies need to be given out to Kentucky for one, because a lot of people thought that Nostradamus was infiltrating Tartarus due to some sort of ability tied to his own power, and this was a skill issue that Kentucky could not get past the guards, or didn't think he was going to be able to get past the guards. That is not the case. Nostradamus had permission this entire time, and in hindsight, looking back, looking at the rune that we saw last chapter, nobody really came to the idea that Nostradamus could be working with Odin. This is wild. Goal then says, "What, doctor, you? Lord Odin is the one who asked you to do this? So that means it was Lord Odin who imprisoned Siegfried, and yet he's willing to help him out now? Providing treatment to him? It seems like even he can show kindness after all." So this shows the naivety of Goal. She's saying Odin might be kind, when that may not be the case at all, as Siegfried's expression seems to not align with that. But Nostradamus does have something of a smile on his face. We'll see if we get any more on that later. Goal then continues and says, "No, more importantly, one of humanity's fighters doing favors for a god. So that means you are a traitor?" Now, Nostradamus' face looks sinister here as Goal is terrified, but he quickly changes his expression, has a wide smile on his face, and says, "Come on, cut that out. You're ruining my reputation right now." "Well, I'll explain everything later, so I need you to trust me." "Bro, you just kidnapped her. You knocked her out, threw her in a crate, and took her to Tartarus. She wanted to trust you, bro? This man is out of his mind." "Goal, you can trust Nostradamus," says Siegfried. "His abilities as a doctor are excellent. What he said is true. He is the attending physician. Lord Odin, he doesn't want me to die. And for that, he does whatever it takes." Now, this is interesting because, of course, he's being tortured in Tartarus. So if Odin is in charge, he could theoretically just stop the torture, but he's not doing that. Instead, he's just having Nostradamus go and heal him. So this is pretty twisted if you ask me. But I guess we don't know all the details of the situation, so before we cast judgment, we probably need to learn all that. "Also, Goal, there's a reason why I brought you to this place," says Siegfried. "So please, I need you to believe me." Goal says, "What reason could there possibly be?" Siegfried replies and says, "I really apologize for doing something like this so suddenly, but I need your help. We need to stop the resurrection of the primordial gods." Goal says, "Resurrection of the primordial gods? What in the world are you talking about?" Siegfried says, "I need to tell you about everything. It all began a long time ago." I find it interesting that Siegfried wants to tell Goal about this because he previously had never met her. The only thing I can think of is that he just knows that Goal is the closest person to Hilda, so she'll relay the message, and it's going to be a lot easier to get her here than it would be to get Hilda here. Other than that, I couldn't tell you the reason, but this is the person he singled out. Maybe it ties into something that she'll do later on in the story, who knows. Siegfried goes on to tell us this story. The 88 primordial gods created this world, the heavens and the earth. We see the primordials standing atop the clouds looking down at the surface. They're looking down at the many gods who were deemed incomplete, the gods born underneath the primordials, the regular gods that we have today, essentially. But not necessarily the exact ones, it's like the founding fathers of those. Among the 88 primordial gods who ruled the original world, there were those who possessed overwhelming power. They were supreme. They were the strongest. And it shows us a picture of Odin, Satan, Chaos, and Ymir. They were called the four primordial pillars, Yggdrasil, the primordial giant Ymir, the demon king Satan, the lord of chaos, and the creator god, Odin. Insanity. So Odin has been a primordial all this time, so it seems. We cut back to Gold now, who says Ymir, Chaos, Satan, and Lord Odin too. Siegfried says, in a world where primordial gods and deities coexisted, one day the Yggdrasil declared war. The incomplete gods deemed failures were seen as unnecessary. They multiplied beyond the primordial numbers. And this was a problem. They were just something that was a scourge in Odin's mind. He said, twist them, crush them, and then the massacre of the gods began. They started decimating these deities. 7 primordial gods supported the Yggdrasil. However, the remaining 77 primordials turned against the 11 gods in order to protect the other deities, which eventually led to a war among the primordial gods themselves. So there was 11 total primordials on Odin's team. These other 7 are probably the silhouettes we saw in the initial primordial explanation, because Ymir, Satan, Chaos, and Odin don't seem to be pictured there in the silhouettes. So these guys are going to be interesting as well, and we don't get any of their images or any of their titles or any of their names yet, so I do think that they will be prominent later in the story, obviously. Among the 77, though, on the opposing side, we see prominently featured Izanagi, who seems to have some leading role in that faction. Another person we may see to the left, but I'm not 100% sure, is potentially Gaia. There was a translation calling her primordial earlier in the series as well, so it's possible she was part of this, especially given that there was, 88 total now. But Izanagi being there is really cool confirmation to get, and he was an instrumental part of this war and survived to tell the tale. This is what the world called the twilight of the primordial gods, otherwise known as Ragnarok. Awesome. This is Record of Ragnarok. Ragnarok was the initial primordial god war. Are we going to get a Ragnarok 2.0 down the line? We see this epic panel of Odin leading the charge into the battle with his sword out, and they start taking out gods left and right. The 77 primordial gods united and fought with their lives on the line. However, before the absolute power of the 4 pillars, they were defeated one by one. Amazing shots of Odin walking through like a straight Don, cutting people up, Ymir mopping people's heads off, Satan and Chaos putting in work, putting in pain. And after a long battle, the primordial gods realized defeating the 4 pillars was impossible. They resorted to a last-ditch effort to save the world, essentially, and the survivors fled the scene in order to lure Yggdrasil to a desolate wilderness at the edge of the world. There, the remaining primordials, seemingly led by Izanagi, all band together to use their power at once. They put their palms toward the sky and enacted a forbidden technique called Gleipnir, Weave of Sealed Gods. This catches Yggdrasil by surprise. This giant black vortex encompasses the entire area and basically surrounds the 11 primordials in the air. We start to see that primordial sealing them start cracking under the pressure. The power is too much to deal with, and Izanagi's hand itself even starts cracking. This is how he got a scar on his hand. Great to see this payoff from last chapter, as when he was healing Okita, it was very prominently featured that he had a massive scar on his palm. Now, the interesting thing about this is that with the cracks, it does seem to mirror what happens to the people that lose in Record of Ragnarok. Is this a hint toward what is happening? Is this a hint toward potentially some kind of sacrificial ritual happening within the tournament? I don't know, but this is interesting to say the least. And if Izanagi could heal from it, does that mean other people could potentially heal from it as well if you theoretically had the crystals? I don't know if these are exactly the same thing, but they do look somewhat similar. So I'll let you guys be the judge on that. We see this giant black hole in the sky. Through the great forbidden technique Gleipnir, the Yggdrasil and 11 pillar were sealed. The war ended, and many of the primordial gods who once dominated the world and other deities were annihilated. They disappeared without a trace from the eyes of the masses. That is why we don't really have primordials around today. The only ones we have kind of stay in the shadows, like Izanagi, and potentially, like I said, maybe Gaia was one of them, but we can see that there was not many that survived, like 8 or 9 on this page that were left after this war. And even then, if Gaia was a primordial, she got defeated by the Greeks anyway. Now, it's very clear that Yggdrasil, Odin, all of them were caught off guard by this technique and they really couldn't do anything about it. We will get some more explanation on this in a second. Goal was completely shocked to hear about this. She's like, what the hell is that story? It's completely different from the myths I know. The primordial gods, rulers of the old world, couldn't withstand their own immense power and they self-destructed and disappeared. That is what is told to us. Afterward, the gods created the new world consisting of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. And that's what is taught. This is, of course, what we heard and were told in the original Primordial Reveal chapter, where this is what the majority of the gods believe. It even shows a picture of Zeus here. It's unclear if Zeus knows the truth. If I had to bet, I think Zeus probably has some insider information on this. Of course, time will tell. Siegfried goes on to say, that's right, everyone in this world believes in the story that was created much later on. However, what I just told you is the real truth. And Goal's like, holy shit, the truth that you just said? She pauses. This is so sudden. Siegfried says, I know you're confused, but there's still more to that truth. Goal's like, oh my goodness, there's more to it? Siegfried continues and says, it was just before the primordial four pillars were completely sealed that they realized what was happening. Satan says, I see how it is. They're avoiding fighting us. Ymir says, my movements are slowing down. It seems like they're compressing time. It seems like they plan to seal us forever. Chaos says, interesting. And Odin says, in that case, let us leave our divine runes behind outside this place. And these four streaks fly out of the black hole somehow. The four pillars entrusted their divinity, their runes, to a treasure as a medium, and they were released somewhere into the world. These four streaks fly out of the hole. They all go in these different directions. Izanagi is shook seeing these things fly out. Someone worthy of the four divine runes shall awaken us once more when the time is right. These treasures are called the four treasures of calamity, and we see Ymir's necklace, Satan's mask, Odin's sword, and Chaos's rings or gauntlets. And thus the Yggdrasil continues to wait until the day that someone worthy of wielding the power of the four treasures of calamity will appear, or was to appear. The four treasures of calamity, says Goal, and Siegfried says, if this story was simply forgotten, there would not have been a problem after all. But one god ruined all this. One day, years later, as if an eternity had passed by, at last, a nameless god appears. We see this mountain landscape as this one guy is climbing this mountain to the top. He's bandaged up, he's hooded, and he gets to the peak and he sees Odin's sword lodged in the mountain. He says, I found it. I finally found it. The magic sword, Gram. Might be Garm. This might be a mistranslation, but I don't know. Even though that god harbored a deeply dark ambition in his heart, he was young and ordinary, without any notable talents. He walks up, he's looking into his book, so he's been studying this through the book of Golnir that Satan mentioned back in that Odin versus Beelzebub and Buddha chapter. He sees Odin's rune on the sword and he says, it wasn't wrong. The history written in this forbidden book of Golnir is true. This is one of the four treasures of calamity. It's imbued with the rune of the primordial four pillars. It must have been calling out to me. I've kept you waiting for too long. And he grabs the sword and all the energy flies out. He starts screaming in pain, but he does not let go of the sword. We start to see that the sword, the power is flowing into him. The power of the four primordial pillars as his blood vessels in his eyes start shattering, and this is how he loses his eye. You'll know who this is in a second, obviously. Even in the midst of losing his eye, he succeeds in dislodging the sword and pulling it out of the mountain. Exhausted, he steps back, he staggers, but he stays on his feet. He raises up the sword to his face. And then, obtaining the magic sword Gram, the young ordinary god compatible with the divine rune of the creator god, awakened. Thanks to that rune, with his immense power and wisdom, he came to dominate the Norse pantheon and was worshipped. Before Siegfried can finish, Gold chimes in and starts yelling, he dominated the Norse pantheon? Is that what you just said? Wait a minute, it can't be. The nameless ordinary god is, and Siegfried says, yup, that's right. He is a god you know well. From that moment on, he was known as the supreme god Odin. Holy shit, man. So this is effectively the young version of the Odin we have today, but it is not the initial Odin. So the primordial god Odin and the Odin we know in the story are different beings entirely. It's unclear how all this works as of yet. It seems like he obviously was imbued with power from the creator, but we don't know if like Odin, the primordial, is like within the Odin we have today's body and like they can speak to each other. We don't know any of these things yet, but we do know that they are completely separate beings, and getting this power from the rune allowed him to conquer the Norse, and he is the father of Thor, he is the father of the Norse pantheon, all made possible from this whole moment. So he seized the opportunity, found the rune, and now he wants to resurrect the rest of the primordials, bring them back. This could be a very dangerous proposition though, because who's to say that they won't just stomp him out when they return? I don't think they're gonna have allegiance to him. They view themselves as a superior anyway, but who knows, maybe he's trying to just take their power and get more powerful himself. All these things are yet to be revealed, but insane lore dump this month. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments, because there's so much to talk about. I'll definitely be making more videos on this as we go into the next month. But for those that stayed to the end of the video, we also do get this preview at the end of the chapter for next month, confirming the round 11 fighters: Simo, the infamous sniper, versus Loki. That is round 11, but we'll talk about that more in the preview prediction video. I'll see you guys then. Peace.